So the new patch just came out and what the invisible boats. That's the new problem of the week. You know, as far as stuff about the new patch goes, like there's some weird stuff with like the NPCs like movement now. I don't know if anybody else has noticed that, but some of like the humanoid NPCs will deadass just like hold W at you and like push you around now. Lord only knows why that's happening. It's beyond me. All that aside, because that is not what this video is about. I have a few gripes having played Deepwoken in the past couple of weeks with the job system. So it's most noticeable on Irisia in particular, which is likely because they decided to rework the area, rebuilt a lot of its locations, I guess. And I think like fundamentally it works, but because of like the new job stuff, Irisia might be one of the most frustrating places to actually progress in Deepwoken. And let me explain why it's so frustrating. So a while back when I made the video talking about how like events and job spawns and stuff like need to be kind of touched up because as it stood, it's just a little bit whack to like walk around in circles until mobs spawn on you. I think everybody agrees that that was lame. But currently the way that the job boards work is that they exist in an area of the game and you pick them up and usually they give you jobs that are localized to that area of the game. Now the issue is these areas are very, very broad. So if you pick up a job board, sometimes you're gonna have to cross the entire fucking ocean to get to the job that you just picked up. Especially in a place like Irisia, which is very hurt by the fact that these job boards aren't localized to specific areas on Irisia. You can pick up a job at the little smugglers camp on Irisia and it will send you all the way to Upper Irisia and give you a mission that is like way out of your pay grade. And I'm not a stranger to the fact that you can do pretty much any of the early game missions at like level 1 if you're really like just committed to the bit. But the thing is like it's just really not optimal. Like why would I do this when I can just go fight ocean events and have an infinitely easier time? Which brings me to my next point. Ocean events. They really don't conform to the rest of the rules of the game. Why is there job boards stationed at all of the docks when there's no ocean events on the job boards because they're just completely random spawns? The job board at Etris just sends you straight to Irisia and sometimes Upper Irisia, which fucking sucks because think about being a new player. You go down there, you see the job board, the game's telling you that you need to do jobs to gain experience and it sends you all the way to Upper Irisia. You have to run past a million fucking golems and stone sparks just to get to your quest objective, and it happens to be like, I don't know, an authority patrol, which you have a stiletto because you wanted to use a dagger in this game and suddenly you're having to fucking tick down 400 HP authority officers with a weapon that literally does 10 damage. Now, a lot of you fuckers will be super quick to just be like, skill issue. But for these new players, how are they supposed to educate themselves through trial and error when mostly it's just error? There's no trial to be done. I think 1,000 times out of like 1,001, a new player is just going to look up a progression guide made by somebody who's played the game for longer, has more experience and knowledge, and that is just a result of a fundamental issue with the game's design. Specifically this job board system. I think it needs a lot of work, but the thing is, where it's at, it has the bones to become like the perfect system for new players and old players, with a few minor changes that would make it so much better. First of all, more entry-level jobs on these boards, and especially so in the early game areas. Anything, man. This could be as simple as more like bandit type events, and I know that everybody hates the fucking bandits, but like, I mean, come on, stuff like that needs to exist for new players to just get a feel for the game. Right now you go to the job board and it's going to show you like the war events, Sharkos, which are fine. That's actually probably the best option for early game, but that's really about it. I would love to see more stuff that's just simple, easy, quick stuff to grind that will just give you some fucking XP, you know? Secondly, confining events to a certain area around a job board to just make it less tedious. If I pick up a job from the job board at that little Pathfinder camp on Irisia, it shouldn't send me to Burning Stone Garden. It just shouldn't. Maybe I can go over there and there's a job board like posted up out there, maybe like a smaller camp, and it sends me there then. And that would be a lot easier because then you have these specific areas of the map that you can go to for specific event types and stuff, and it's just more consistent, it's neater, it's cleaner, and it makes more sense. And it doesn't force the player to go travel the entire fucking island if they don't want to. Not to mention, this would go hand in hand with adding more events because you could fill up these areas with events that are like specific to the area. For example, that Pathfinder job board, stuff like, I don't know, bandits and Sharkos and stuff like that, mud skippers, all of that makes sense as events that you can pick up for that area because it's like the very, very starter area for people who just picked up the game to go to. But instead, the very, very starter area decides to send you to the next tier immediately because I swear to God, half the time when I pick up events from there, it's just Upper Irisia, Upper Irisia, Upper Irisia, Upper Irisia, and then it just feels like Lower Irisia basically just doesn't get used. And I'm using Arisia a lot as like my primary example, but this would fix a lot of areas in the game, just having more job boards that are tied to like smaller confined areas, so it's just not as tedious. You don't have to do as much running around. See, that's the cool thing about Songseeker. That's why people go there so often in like the mid game. It's because it's literally the most confined space. All of the XP is consistent because there's consistent event spawns that are always going to be there, and you don't have to worry about whether or not the game's gonna send you to some fuck ass cliff for no reason, or maybe spawn your Sharko in a wall like it did for me here. I think I found the Sharko. Which brings me on to my third point, set or fixed event spawns, which is something that I said when I was pitching the whole fucking job board thing rework in my video about it way back when. I'm sure that a lot of work went into the logic for spawning events in places that make sense, but it doesn't work. Just swallow your pride and tear it up and set fixed event spawns so that it doesn't feel like fucking ass to play the game. And listen, they don't have to be high effort, bro. Just throw them somewhere where they're not gonna get stuck on top of a cliff or inside a fucking wall or something. Like, I know it's not that simple to just change the whole fucking system, but I feel like a system where you have fixed event spawns, little like tiny invisible blocks that are like markers for each event to spawn at, just scattered around the map to where they're like in areas that make sense and are easy for a player to access. Like, I don't know, every other fucking game that spawns enemies, they usually put them in places that make sense. It wouldn't be that big of a deal. I can't imagine it being that much work to the point where like it's just not fucking doable, and it would be a lot easier for everybody involved, especially because there's not that many areas in the game to begin with. And of all the areas in the game, the one that makes the most sense and is probably the most fun to actually like play through is layer 2, because guess what? That place has fixed spawns that make sense. It creates a pattern when you play the game. It creates like a series of events you have to go through. In other words, it just cleans up the gameplay loop and makes it a lot less fucking confusing for new players and for just everybody, okay? Because it's confusing for me, and I've played this game for fucking like 5 years at this point, bro. Just hear me out on this one, okay? Please. All this pretty code that was made to make everything do randomly generated stuff, put things in random places that make at least a little bit of sense, would be just marginally worse compared to actual like carefully selected locations for things to spawn. You see what I'm getting at, dude. It's just not natural, and it would just make a lot more sense. I think what's integral for verse 3 right now is to make the game flow better. I think that is hands down the biggest issue with the game, is that it just doesn't flow very nicely at this point. From start to finish, it just feels weird, disjointed, and a lot of the fucking things in place just don't really make a whole lot of sense. I would love for that to change. And the job system is probably the easiest thing to make changes to that would completely fix this problem. All right, that about does it. Got that off my chest, got it out of my system. If you agree, let me know. If you don't, also let me know. Have a beautiful day. Peace.